That's fireplace going behind you.
Oh yeah, do the Yuletime log.
Chill
It's
vibe.
Christmas, baby.
It is getting close to the holiday season, so that's
I
cool.
love
Cool
it.
vibe
That's
to it.
perfect. That's perfect.
It's got this blue flame on it too.
You guys will have to get some like dollar store Holly Berry shit. You know, a couple little things. Holiday season, maybe not Christmas because we don't want to be too religion oriented and make anybody feel offended or left out. But you know, put up a couple things.
Right. I want to do that for Halloween, but yeah, did we even put? No, we didn't end up using any of that stuff.
I could decorate
It's
for
okay.
Halloween year round though.
Oh, dude, I love that's my favorite holiday to decorate. My grandma got me into she lived off 162nd in Stark.
Yep.
And I'd always go down there, and we were driving by one time, and we saw this lady who decorated and made like characters in her yard, like she had the devil and then this werewolf man at the mailbox.
Nice.
So when he came up to the mailbox, it was a wolf man right there. And then she had this like pig butcher, like butchering a guy on a table. Super detailed scenes of different scenarios.
Yeah.
And it's got me into it. And so she brought me down there one day, or we stopped by, and we were asking her about it. And then she asked if I wanted to help out. And then I, got approval from my grandma. And
Nice.
she's like, sure, that's cool. She wanted me to do something creative and constructive like that. So she just let me
That's why you started getting into all the Halloween decorations?
Yeah.
Every year he goes crazy.
Every year
That's
I would
cool.
add on to what I did before. And
Yep.
like the first year I started out, I got a costume from Goodwill. It was just like a scream mask and like a suit, and just put it together. I had like these gloves that you use for what is that? Like just cleaning gloves. So it's like heavy duty kind of rubber cleaning gloves.
Oh, yeah.
And I just threw them on there. But to make these guys, you have to stand them up with a wooden stake. So it's just like you pound in
like a scarecrow.
a 6-foot stake, and then you have a crossbar that goes inside the body, and you just stuff some clothes and fill it with. Well, when I helped her, we filled it with pine needles because she had these big fir trees in her backyard. So when the fall happened, her whole yard was covered in them. She'd rake them up and then stuff these clothes that she had and make these basically dummies.
Yeah.
And then she'd put Halloween costumes on them and make them look like figures. But she showed me how to do it.
Okay.
And then that's when I got into doing that.
Scary silhouettes when you see them at nighttime.
Yeah.
We used to have an oak tree in Minnesota. We did a similar one, but we used the oak leaves because all the leaves fall in fall in Minnesota.
Yeah, that's perfect.
So we stuffed the jeans, stuffed the shirt, tied the sleeve, add the glove, and then we had a guy hanging from the branch because we had a big one.
Scary!
Oh
God!
Leaves fall off it in the fall, so it's like this big dead-looking oak tree with the stuffed. But then it kind of got to that point where it was like some people weren't sure about what decorations and actions were. You should be having out, and it was like, is it too much to have somebody hanging in a tree, And
that makes me think.
People started getting offended.
It did happen where there was a news story about somebody who didn't like the idea of having people hanging in trees by nooses.
That is true.
So it was kind of something where everybody kind of just shied away from it, and it was like, yeah, we'll just leave that one alone.
I took it
Keep them on the ground, you know what I mean?
I went too far. Me and my buddy Justin got into doing funny pranks and just messing with people when we were younger. And so when Halloween came around, I was like, I don't know, we came up with the idea because he was helping me decorate the yard a little bit. And so we came up with the idea of taking one of these bodies and putting it out on the road, not too far from us, down the road off of Stark in Cleveland. And so I had a video camera at the time too, this old school JVC video camera, just tape. And we brought it out and we set it up on the tree stump and laid this body out that we had made and put a hoodie on so it looked like a real dude. He was laying face down in the road, arm like just there. And it was a hill too, so you'd come up this hill, right? And you wouldn't see it until the last 10, 15 feet. You come up the hill and there it is. You're like, oh shit. And so we set up the camera, put it in there. We used actually a basketball for the head.
Nice.
And so when they'd go and check it, the'd just be this, like, what the fuck?
People were actually like, oh shit.
And yeah, a couple people went up, stopped, and just all of a sudden. And then one person came over, because we did it a couple times.
Yeah.
Or we just left it there for a minute, let the camera roll, and a couple people rolled by, and someone would go around it. And this one person actually grabbed it, threw it in their car aggressively, like they were on a mission to just be like, what the fuck is this? And it looked so funny from a distance because we're like halfway down the block in the neighborhood, hiding behind a car watching people, and this guy's just, it wasn't perfectly attached together,
Yeah.
So
it looks like he's just grabbing a body.
Well, he grabbed half a body and threw it in the car, and then grabbed the legs and threw it in there. It just looked all epic.
Perfect for Halloween.
Perfect for Halloween. He just drove into the Goodwill parking lot off of Stark, where I used to live, and sat there for a minute, and then he just like threw it out of the car after he realized it was some fake crap.
You know what's terrible on the lines of picking up dead bodies, random dead bodies off the road and throwing them in the car. You know, Hilton's Haven up there by my house on Stark Street?
Oh, yeah.
I was walking Bubba, and then, remember my roommate Mike, who had that little one, Thunder, the little white pit bull? We were both walking them, and they were puppies. We were on the one side across from Hilton's Haven. And this guy pulls up with, big old Jimmy. He's got the window rolled down. He had this big, huge pit bull. Just huge, scary one with the window.
Those ones that are...
Dude, all the way rolled down, right? And he gets out of the car, and he leaves the window down, and he goes into the place. And all of a sudden, the dog is just like barking, roaring out the window. And we're just trying to walk and not look at it. And Bubba's barking at him. Dozer's barking back. They're puppies. But this dog just hops out of the car. Whoop. Huge dude lands and just takes off like a maniac straight at us. And as soon as it runs out into the road, a car going like 40 miles an hour, 50 miles an hour, boom, over the top of it. It bounces underneath the car like 3-4 times, and it's just laying in the road. And I'm like, oh my gosh, this dog made it like halfway across the road and just gets smoked. And before the guy even comes out of the store and realizes what happened, this carload of like 5 dudes, like Hispanic dudes, pulls up, gets out, picks the dog up, and just puts it in the trunk, closes the car up, and gets in the car, and then just drives away. And we're all standing, and it happened within like a minute. It was like,
oh my
guy
God.
pulls in, dog jumps out, dog runs, dog gets hit, and we're like, oh my gosh, I can't believe this just happened. Is that dog dead? Car pulls up, dudes get out, dudes look at dog, they say something for a second, grab dog, throw in trunk, get in, drive away. And it was like, what? And then dude comes out and he's like, where's my dog? I'm like, dude, your dog just jumped out the window. You know what I mean? You're trying
Holy shit.
Tell this story to a dude who had no clue. You're like, yeah, your dog jumped out a window, ran across the street trying to attack me, got ran over by a car going 60 miles an hour, and then a carload of Mexican guys got out, threw it in the car, and they drove away. I don't know where they went with it.
Oh my God.
And the guy like comes back at you and he says, that was my girlfriend's dog.
Oh my God.
He's like, I just borrowed her car to go get a pack of smokes, dude, and I took her dog for a drive.
No way.
She's had that dog for years. She's going to kill me. And I'm like, oh my gosh.
Dude.
He's like, where'd they go with it? Did they go to the vet? I'm like, I don't know.
That's crazy.
It was weird, man.
No way. That is...
So,
oh my God.
On the note of random people picking up dead bodies on the road, that's my random people picking up dead bodies on the road
That beats my
story.
dead body story. Mine was just a prank. But we did do one that had to do with hanging. That's what made me think of it when you're talking about hanging a fake guy. We actually, after we did the one in the road, we went over into the neighborhood grade school, Highland Grade School, that was in the neighborhood right there. And we climbed up in a tree, and we actually waited for a car and then just, like, tossed it.
Oh, my God.
Like, just out of the tree, just onto it, and Justin was up in the tree. I was over
like Jackass when they threw the body off the bridge.
Dude, that's like some good son shit. You remember that movie?
But we're sitting there. I'm in the bush with the camera way over across the street, so I can get a good view on it. Nighttime, so all you're gonna see is like lights, kind of silhouette of a car, and maybe something hitting it because the camera was old school.
Dude, that guy got crashed or something.
Dude, didn't you ever see The Good Son?
What is it called?
The Good Son with Macaulay Culkin.
Yeah, we were bad.
Have you seen that?
Probably.
The Good Son with Macaulay Culkin.
I have not.
Where he gets his mom or somebody dies, and him and his sister go to live with like an aunt or an uncle for a little while.
Whoa, this sounds familiar.
And the cousin is really weird, is Macaulay Culkin, and the two boys start hanging out, and he's like, "Come on, let's go do this thing," and he's got this dummy, and they go to the highway overpass, and he calls him Highwayman, and he waits for all these cars to come. And then right as they're about to drive onto the bridge, he throws the dummy over, and it causes like a big pile up, and all these people die.
Oh, shit.
And then he gets all weird. Yeah, that's kind of what it reminded me of.
Whoa.
Yeah.
It's all terrible.
It's all terrible. He's a psychopath. I mean, I know that wasn't your intention, but, you know. No. Didn't mean to segue it like that.
Right.
Oh, good stuff.
Yeah, that was...
That's crazy.
No, he was terrible in that movie. He was a terrible child, like the demon child. I don't like those movies. Those always weird me out.
They're hilarious.
The evil kid movies, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Especially when you have kids. Like, once you have, like, a 5-year-old, and then you watch a movie about a psycho 5-year-old, it's just weird, because then your kid wakes up in the middle of the night, and they're like, Dad, and you're like, yeah, what are you doing awake? You're freaking me out. You know? It's like, kind of look at him like, put that hammer away. And it's like, I want to build something, Dad. It's like, I just watched a movie about a creepy kid with a hammer. Like, no hammers for you today.
Saying that always makes me think of Signs. When the little girl gets up in the middle of the night, in the farmhouse, and out in the middle of nowhere.
Silhouette.
Oh, like, right.
Dad, can I have a glass of water? There's a monster outside my bedroom. He's like, just woke. Yeah, Mel Gibson's like,
fucking Jews.
It's those. What did he say? It was Lionel and the Wolfington brothers or something? Like some group of kids that come around, mess around with the crops and do like pranks on people.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
And that scene just still gets to me. Like those scenes with those creepy silhouettes of
and
like
when their
figures
faces change when they notice when he looks up and he's like, it kind of makes that
and just the silhouette of it, knowing that you're out in the middle of nowhere, so you're vulnerable. And he's up there, he's just getting his daughter a glass of water. He's got 2 kids. He's by a single father. Mother died. He's just living there. Oh, and he's got his brother, younger brother, living with him in the barn over there.
Oh, right.
And then that's when he goes over to take it out. But that scene when they're up in the bedroom, gives her the glass of water, and he's setting her down, and then he looks up and sees it on the barn.
Yeah.
With the moon hitting it, the silhouette, just that to me would be disturbing.
I gotta rewatch that movie. I don't think it got enough credit. It's like
that's one of my favorite movies.
It's worth a watch or two.
It has this horror realism that really is just disturbing. You really are just like, dude, if this happened, it would be like that. These beings that are just coming from some other place, on a mission to take over, like Independence Day.
Oh,
that's why Independence Day is one of the best, because it just has that level of if they're gonna come and take over, they're gonna destroy the planet.
Oh, dude, there's been some interesting stuff. I remember when we were in high school, Matt and I, we used to go to the Anoka County, or not Anoka County Library, Multnomah County Library, over by East Hill, and we'd use the internet because back then not everybody had computers. The high schools had them.
They had the
and barely anybody at home had them. You know what I mean? And so you could go use your library card, get on the internet, and just look shit up,
browse around, do whatever.
And Matt had found this stuff called Zeta Articuli, and it was written by this lady who claimed that a rogue alien, was visiting her. And it was all, dude, like this lady talked about a lot of crazy intergalactic stuff and the different races and different things. And I couldn't remember all the information because I didn't read it all back then, but I remember my brother telling me about it. And, she was being told, like, this is how, the intergalactic thing works, and there's a council. And this other guy, he's got a book. It's called In Defense of Sacred Ground. Can't remember his name. Only read a little bit about it. But it has to do with the same thing. This alien's been coming to him since the 80s, and has told him galactic history, all these different things. And he says that the alien tells him that we're not on the Intergalactic Council because we're like one of the most immature races in the galaxy, basically.
Very young in our...
Yeah, we fight amongst ourselves, and until we can all be one as a race, then we can... Because we already separate ourselves as a species.
Right. Until we can be whole, we can't
let alone
really
working with other completely different species, because like in the rest of the galaxy, every other species is one. They're all like
it makes
one
sense,
together.
They would combine and then go beyond that into a bigger group.
Yeah,
within a.
It's interesting, dude. And so he says that these aliens claim, or are saying that we're on the verge of being wiped extinct because of what we're doing to the whales, the dolphins, and the porpoises. That those creatures are unique to the planet Earth, is what this dude says, and that if they go extinct, that's the final switch because they're actually highly intelligent beings. And they're like very special creatures. And so like this guy's saying like if we hunt whales out till extinction, they're gonna pull the trigger, and like that's the final say.
Interesting idea.
Well,
it reminds me of
take the Chinese out. They're the ones doing it.
It's kind of
I'm just kidding.
Well, it's interesting, right?
At least I'm glad they have those people out there, trying to stop those illegal whaling.
Stuff.
Yeah. And there's a lot of nations slowly. We're getting there. We're starting to see a more communal. With the opening of the internet and communication within just the past 2 decades, you've seen such an epic growth.
Cosmetics and stuff with the whales and horses, and they make cosmetics with all sorts of weird creatures.
Yeah. The animal fat.
I hope that as we are
lipstick,
connected,
all that.
As we become more connected, I hope that we can communicate better and make these things a global thing. Like, no, we're not doing this anymore. No, we're not doing this anymore.
India. Did you guys hear about India? I'm not 1,000% sure on the validation of it, but I read an article about India being the first country to pass a Bill of Rights for whales, dolphins, and porpoises, recognizing them as the first non-human persons.
Oh,
And,
yep.
yeah,
I
so
did
they
hear about that.
I didn't hear about that.
Yeah, so allegedly in India, from what I read, it's illegal for any company, private or federal government, for research, science, or education. Nothing. No zoos can hold any whales, dolphins, or porpoises anymore. So nothing. No Sea Worlds.
Yeah, you think about how vast the ocean is, and you've got
Yep.
these animals that are massive, like
Yeah.
what, like 10, like probably 10 tons or something,
They're
maybe
huge.
more.
Some of them are
these
huge,
whales,
yeah.
these big killer whales, and they're in these small tanks, like a little
Right.
bathtub. It's like putting a human in a bathtub,
Yeah.
and there's you go.
Well, they're getting to the point
It's
with
like-
research on dolphins where, and this was a Netflix documentary, Living with the Dolphins. It was like a 4-part one where they have a camera that looks like a baby dolphin, and it operates with a tail and it swims. And so they put it in with a pod and it swims with them, and these dolphins interact with it really weird.
Whoa.
Well, they've done a lot of research, yeah, and so they have very similar human patterns. And
Whoa.
one of them that I thought was interesting was the pufferfish, because it's a hallucinogenic to them. And so in comparison of age, they say that it starts at like the 12 to 14 year age range. That the teens, and it's on footage, they will pass the puffer in a circle, and they'll throw the puffer around, and they'll swim, and they pass it, and they only nibble on it lightly, and they throw it to each other, and they start to hallucinate. And then they get synchronized swimming and all kinds of crazy games. And for like,
that's mind-blowing.
Here's an interesting.
That's seriously some mind-blowing stuff.
Yeah, they have individual names for each other that they go by for their entire lives. So each dolphin will have a certain tone and name that it goes by.
That it can recognize a call.
They
basically,
have. Think of this. Here's an interesting one: prison behavior and gangs, right? And getting jumped in and getting raped in and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
If a dolphin gets outcast from its pod and it swims alone and it comes across another pod, the young males will let this one around, but they will, even the males, if it's another male dolphin, they will all rape it, and they will all take turns having sex with it and beating it up, and then it becomes part of their pod, and it swims with them and lives with them. Yeah, and the drug use tapers off in their drug use tapers off. They use it heavily in their teens and early 20s, tapers off towards their 30s, but even the older. It still continues sparsely and sporadically in the adults and the older ones in their 50s and 60s. They'll still play with the pufferfish once in a while. So there's a lot of strange similar behaviors, and like the language decoding, like sound technology is getting really good, and data crunching is getting really good. And algorithms are getting amazing, so they're starting to figure things out, So language is getting decoded. So kind of India is kind of saying like, hey, these guys have patterns and they live like humans. So we have to respect them. So now, like, I guess fishing, it's illegal to disturb them in their natural environment.
That's amazing.
So anywhere in Indian waters, if there's a dolphin pod, you can't scuba dive. You can't do all this interaction. You can't fish in those waters. You got to pull up your lines. And I guess it's gotten kind of a serious thing. So I'm curious to see the validity of the article. I haven't done a ton of research, but I thought it was cool. And like the pufferfish thing, the rape thing, that came from the documentary, The Living with the Dolphins on Netflix.
Wild.
Yeah, that's an interesting thing to see, that there's these animals, they seem just like wild, but they have a level of intelligence that it gives it a human quality, like what we would define ourselves as intelligent.
Well, look at the
beings.
pattern, the behavior patterns too.
It's amazing.
Dude, even mushrooms, dude. I just watched a documentary yesterday on Netflix about mushrooms.
Oh, really?
I got that on my list. I think it's probably the same one.
Talks about communication and how complicated they are when they need certain nutrients. They'll do whatever they can to get exactly what they want. How they can they create these. There's these little worms or little teeny bacteria or something like that, and they're really high in sulfur, and they create these rings inside of the roots and shit. These three rings or something, however much it wants to make. They're perfect rings in this, and they secrete the sugars from the tree, I think it is, to draw or whatever nutrient that this creature needs, and the creature perfectly swims in between these loops, and then once it gets in between the loops close and they cinch it and they suck out all the
nutrients,
what it needs, the sulfur, high in sulfur, that's what it needs, so it'll suck it right out of it. So it's got this super sophisticated way of getting exactly what it needs, and then it grows within tree roots, wraps around it, becomes a part of it, and it takes the tree roots, give it something, and the mushrooms give it what the tree root needs. So it's this perfect exchange, and so it's a win-win situation, and that has to happen for like the whole world to like the ecosystems to be healthy.
It reminds me of hugelkultur.
It's amazing just to think.
They give these, and it's a huge system, and they're figuring out like when you pull plants out of a pot and you see kind of all the roots, and then you get that weird it looks like cobwebs. Mm-hmm. That's the mushroom fungi. That's the fungi right there. The network of fungi that's distributing what that soil needs, because the roots can only go so far. So the mushroom, the fungi, can go really far, and it'll reach out and
connecting nutritional and bring biodiversity in there. That's amazing.
And they've been around for they're finding out 2.7 billion years, I think, like that. They found a fossilized mushroom in an African volcano magma thing.
That's awesome.
So they had their full form. Yeah, they're saying that they were
there before we were,
and that they're super intelligent, and they could one guy that Paul Stamets.
Yes, Paul
Stamets. He believes that they're sentient. He thinks that they
he was on Joe Rogan's podcast. Okay, pretty amazing podcast. One of the best I've ever heard. I always love the ones that go deep into these ancient history of our planet, civilizations.
Right.
That to me was amazing. That one,
it's like superfood.
He went deep into showing how these structures and their different properties and all these different types of mushrooms. And there were some things he couldn't go into because he said that he used to work for the government and did some certain projects where there's things he can't, I guess, talk about out in the open.
About, shiitake mushrooms or something, or portobello.
Yeah, there's certain properties.
They'll kill me if I talk about something about this particular mushroom.
Well, I feel like the psilocybin and magic mushrooms. That's kind of an interesting concept. University of Florida. It's another little study that I read. A couple things. I did see more than one article that talked about it. Well, it's supposed to regenerate dead brain cells.
Yeah.
And so
cause neurogenesis or whatever they call it.
Yeah, and they don't know anything else that does it. And so they're trying to figure out what in the psilocybin does it, so they can isolate that, extract it, and then just have it a non-hallucinogenic.
Right.
Brain for your, if you got TBIs, like traumatic brain injuries from bicycle accident with no helmet, car accident,
CTE from football.
Yeah, football.
You can't even diagnose till after you die.
Saying if you could mix that, the psilocybin with the lion's mane mushroom, you would have an ultimate complex that you could take daily as a supplemental capsule.
Think of something like that. What about
microdosing it?
What about even on the level of they talk about children who go through neglect, and that neglected kids, the frontal cortex gets underdeveloped, which inmates with brain scans, the violent inmates, the more violent the people, the smaller the frontal cortex. And so you can look at people who come from neglectful lower end living, and then if they have a smaller prefrontal cortex, they're more apt to violence. You know what I mean? But it's you have to wonder if the psilocybin works that way and they figure out how to regenerate, does that have to do with anything? Or could you use stem cells or something like that, dude?
I don't see the harm in testing it in that sense to do a study, see if the patterns are there. If it's legit, then make it a legal thing in a certain quality.
Yeah, because you never know, man.
Legalize it.
Yeah, it's a good step towards.
Because I guess Florida said they didn't find any adverse effect on the body either. And I'd have to look into it more, but I remember when I did look into it, I pulled up more than one article that was related to it. And so it seems like it's valid. But, I'd be interested to learn more, because it's kind of interesting when they say that they studied it and they found no adverse effects on the body whatsoever. That the only thing that they see that's permanent, lasting change is effects for mushrooms is the psychological changes that people have in growth. And I guess it's made people easier for quitting smoking and chewing and things like that. So it's
it doesn't give them that desire to do those things. Rewires the brain in a particular way.
If you think of it like this,
I think it helps with evolution.
You look at you grow up in society, right? We all learn social boundaries, behaviors, beliefs. How does reality work? And our mind gets trained to think one way, and you're kind of it's odd to think outside of this boundary of what normal is.
Right.
And so your mind basically gets taught limitations on very linear thought patterns and thinking once you smoke, you can never quit. Smoking is more addicting than heroin. But you take a hallucinogenic drug that kind of overloads your brain with stimulation, and it opens up doors to thought patterns that you wouldn't normally have, because you've already removed yourself away from those subconscious boundaries that you have
those
from
biases
that you've learned growing up.
Your brain wants to almost rewire itself in a way that's more,
right.
I guess you could say logical.
So you could
for
go
survival,
through,
yeah.
Think of it like hypnosis. Same thing. People talk about hypnosis. I do think hypnosis works for people who are willing to accept, because really hypnosis isn't like putting people to sleep. It's reprogramming subconscious thinking.
They get you into this state
where
they can go
I grow up
and
having my dad
amazing.
tell me that I'm a piece of shit and I can't do anything right. So I grow up thinking I can't do anything right. So every time I make a mistake, I focus and I remember, fuck, you can't do anything right.
Right.
But then you get hypnotized about it and it kind of plugs back. You get so relaxed, your defenses come down, your emotional defenses come down, and you're in a zone that you've submitted to because you're like, this is what I want. So they speak to you, they calm you down, they get you comfortable. And then they start retraining your brain with different thoughts. And they're saying that you, deep in your mind, when you're really relaxed, the boundaries of your mind are a little bit open. So then you're more accepting in the subconscious level to say, I am good at things. I do succeed. And so when you walk away from it, you don't walk away from it unchanged and flawless, but you walk away from it. You don't realize that when you make a mistake, you're not focused on the mistake. Wow. It's when you make a successful thing, you're like, see, yeah, I am good.
Right.
And then when you finish painting a miniature, you're like, I am good. But when you make that little mistake, you don't think, fuck, I suck. I ruined my model. You just go, I'm good. I'll fix that and I'll touch that up.
Right.
You know, and then over time, your subconscious thinking is, I'm good. Just like quitting smoking. You think your whole life, you're taught as a child, never touch nicotine. If you do, you'll never be able to quit.
Right. It creates this mental barrier, program pattern that's very simple.
Social engineering.
It's just it's the way our brains are wired to remember things, and once it gets into our brain, we fully commit to it, associate it, and unless we have some way of restructuring that or being shown that, then we'll continue to do that.
So that's kind of the subliminal. That's the subliminal mind, and that's hypnosis. And so when you think of mushrooms, even pot, people smoke weed and you get a little bit sedated and relaxed. It allows you to have a simpler train of thought, more focused.
You lose your ego, you lose things like that.
And you
fall off.
Separate yourself.
Yeah, it puts up a little bit of a barrier from the hyper influx of information of the day too. So you have like a more simple, focused train of thought. And so you can think deeper in your mind without having so many opinions of everything of the day and of social constructs in your head. It's just, so when you go to mushrooms, it takes you on a further level where you're so out of your normal state of mind that your brain can think in any which way or form. And so when you are thinking positive thoughts and you're on a spiritual level, if you eat them and you're not paying attention, you can trip out and stare at a piece of wood and watch the wood grain for an hour and a half or two.
Right.
But if you realize that your goal is not to get focused on visuals, because you realize that you're high on mushrooms and your goal is to be focused on spiritual personal growth, you can analyze things and you can be honest with yourself about the origins of your issues, because you're not thinking about the normal boundaries of your mind. And so you can make a lot of groundbreaking
change those thoughts.
Changes,
But beyond those ways of thinking to higher forms of thinking.
Exactly.
And grow as, like you're saying, like consciously grow.
The stone, what was it called? The stone monkey theory or whatever.
I've never heard of
high monkey theory.
Cool.
The stoned ape theory.
Stoned ape theory.
Basically, how mushrooms helped us evolve. They helped us,
language. They were saying came about as of the more complex forms of language, because we start out with tones. Like primal.
Right.
You can see it in the
and all their
grade 8 families.
All their foraging, when they would look for like cow pies and shit, and they'd find mushrooms on them or whatever the fact, they would trip out.
Yeah.
And so they think that by them tripping out, that opened up those doorways you were talking about and made them different ways of thinking, and maybe even bring empathy, or who knows. Right. Just basically changed an entire scope of thinking into, maybe they started all of a sudden creating better tools, better shelters.
And that's why I want them to get that Paul Stamets on with Randall Carlson.
Oh, dude, that would be crazy.
What's the other guy's name that gets on? Randall Carlson.
Randall Carlson, and
he's awesome.
Oh my gosh.
I know I'm drawing a blank too, but
why do I always?
Yeah, we'll probably get it.
Sometimes
three
it's
guys,
fun to be in the know, but when there's a stump like this, I love not being in the know, so I can just be like, I got no
these
clue,
guys are just amazing ones. Like historical, he studies like the way historical geology.
Okay. Yeah.
I forget what he's...
Asteroidal impacts.
Yeah, he just understands the way...
Geology works as far as like from like if you're looking from a satellite and you were to look at the terrain, you'd be able to identify what happened in that particular spot. If you see giant displacements of dirt, you go, oh, okay, tsunami hit right there at one point in time. That's why you see 15 miles of all this push in of sediment, is because there was some kind of tsunami that hit it.
Okay.
And, flooded the area. Or if like a ice cap melts and you like the Missoula floods, he looks at shit like that along the gorge, especially. He tries. It's like he thinks that potentially that the Missoula floods or those floods happened in a different way than we thought, that they happened like instantaneously, that like an asteroid hit the ice caps and the immense heat melted everything and created this sudden, just ridiculous amounts of water to rush through, like
Graham Hancock,
Graham Carlson, yeah.
Graham Hancock.
But basically, like everything carved out the gorge in a different way than what mainstream geologists say.
Okay.
So he's kind of looking at this alternate type. I don't know.
And why I think it would be good for those three to be on the same show is because it made me think of, they were talking about these ancient civilizations that go back and had created these advanced, Göbekli Tepe, these ancient structures that were perfectly created and carved in this time where it's like, wait,
how do they have the tools?
How we were just barely, according to history, just creating these structures at this time. So how are we doing this from these dates so far back?
Yeah.
And so maybe mushrooms,
and so precise.
Mushrooms had opened up our, like you were saying, our mind to create these new tools and new ways of building things that our mind just normally, building huts and stuff was just simple. And then we all of a sudden made this leap as we maybe slowly did like psychedelics and open our mind.
I know they did that in like the 50s or the 60s. They gave LSD to like architects and like different people, and they had like a study group, some musicians and these different artistic type people, and gave them LSD, and some of the stuff that they produced in their time on LSD was like profound, life-changing, like architecture drawings and music. And it's like, it does because if you think about it, if you're trying to focus on music but yet you have your entire life of your experiences and your labels and the way that you've gone through and your self-image in the back of your head, you can beat yourself up all day when you're trying to get something done. But if you get your mind expanded on LSD, mushrooms, different things, it kind of, none of that stuff is on your mind. You're just like, hey, this is music, or this is my artwork, this is what I'm, and somehow it just comes out different. Stuff's weird.
Right.
It really is.
That's, you have to wonder. You have to wonder. It's illegal. It's been illegal for a long time, but if it was being studied, truly studied, not by pharma,
actually being taken seriously as something that can help people, and have a positive thing for humanity, instead of its recreational kind of pleasure, in a sense. We use it today, like people go and get high on these drugs and have these experiences, but there's nothing wrong with that.
That's why we got strong penicillin as mushrooms, fungi.
I still question that though, immature people who take mushrooms have these wild, crazy trips that they just lose control because they're not expecting it, and they're not in control of themselves.
Right.
Just
they're kind of weak-minded.
Reckless,
go
chaotic
wild
minds. You know what I mean? And when you think about if there was on a norm, like you look at high CBD marijuana and marijuana users having lower chance of cancer and lower risk of cancer because of their use of marijuana, and if marijuana wasn't being smoked and it was just being ingested and you're getting the same benefits and the same effects, and you look at the psychotropic drugs, the ADD medications, the different things and the different
antidepressants.
Right. So marijuana is a natural ingestible form that has very little adverse effects compared to the
plants,
pharma.
Natural, from the earth.
And I still think that in the next future of, 30 years or so, you're going to see it being used on younger and younger and younger people. It's not going to be just medicinally for adults. It's going to be...
That's true.
I think they'll be using THC to help regulate ADD.
Right? In the right dose with the right... learning about the different properties of it and dialing it in to the point where it's like, okay, we can give this to a child to help with that. That would make sense.
Because they're not smoking it. They're not using it in any harmful way, but... when it slows down, I think we're still getting over the marijuana madness.
It's kind of been
reefer
delved in
madness.
from the years back in the day.
We've got 100 years of it to overcome.
Generations.
And I think
boogeyman, dude. It's the boogeyman.
Like you said, generations.
Fear of the unknown. The fear of the unknown. Oh, this might happen. I don't really know, but they tell me. That's how people believed.
Reefer madness mentality.
Kind of weird, like that. But there are always those groups that
got wasted. That's what we do every weekend, and then they looked at us like we were crazy.
I still view it kind of like,
and then you see them doing it like 5-10 years later or something.
As the next 2 generations above us.
Like what you're calling people all these negative names, and I do believe there is an evolution of like, okay, they're beyond that now. That was just their way of thinking back then, and I can accept that. But
that just goes to show how different our minds.
I still think there's a hang up though.
It's true
with the generations, and it's like as our parents and our grandparents pass on and we become the parents and grandparents, and they're, my parents are gone, grandma, grandpa are gone, that those 2 generations that actually lived through those those things are going to be gone, and it's going to be our generation that are the old
moving
people.
into that.
We're going to be the old Congress.
Or the grandpas.
It's going to be interesting. I think that will be the turning tide of.
It's gonna be crazy.
I think people are being impatient with a lot of our growth. Like, it's exciting because we are growing as society and as people, and we're maturing and we're becoming really great. But I think we take it for granted because a lot of people have this, disdain view of society, like how terrible we are. But
we're so racist.
Historically, we are so not racist. We are so much better than we've ever been in human history.
It's so true. And even I think there's a level of perception that is being created to make people think that. I mean, think about it. They're trying to keep people arguing and fighting with each other. So they can't work together. That's what they want.
And I do believe that as these
kind of divide and conquer. That mentality.
Exactly. Right. As those 2 generations pass, they leave Congress, they leave big business, and these younger generations become the older generations. We are the grandparents. It'll be a different generation, but I think the final bits of the innate racism and things like that, it will die out. I think it will die out, but the sensitivity that we have to everything from those elders, from those times, is like, we only got another 10 years for this shit to die out, people. Let's just be patient.
Right?
Yeah, seriously.
We don't need to take to the streets and burn it down because they're almost all gone.
Like Ray Kurzweil talks about, he's like, some people might live long enough to live forever. And I'm like, that's a scary concept, dude. Like, there's the idea of putting, obviously, consciousness in
Infinite
a machine.
Life.
Like, consciousness in a machine and living forever. Which is kind of
I don't even understand
mind
that. I feel like that wouldn't work.
That one to me is just so weird with the idea of I don't have a strong religious belief of any particular sense. I have like a spiritual belief that there is an energy body, a soul, if you will, and I believe that you can't separate that from who you are as a living being, this creature inside a physical form as well, binded together. I feel like that doesn't make sense to me, putting that in an artificial electron flow of machine, what a computer is. That's what a robot will eventually be.
But then again,
advanced moving computer.
On the contrary, if it is an energy flow and we are all energy and we're bound by the same energy, whatever energy runs in a computer that stores the information and sends the information through electrons, perhaps you could take an energy life form. If we figured out the base energy that we were,
you're right.
Maybe
you're blending the two at some day because they're literally we are made up of. It's all atoms.
Exactly.
It's all atoms. Actually, when you break it down
on a quantum level.
But what gives it its spiritual nature? There's something about life that has this almost grand, intelligent like thought instead of just this, because everything
there is a consciousness.
This is wood, it's not intelligent as far as we know in a sense, but it's just
right now, no.
Structure.
Or is this a petrified body of an intelligent life form that we had no clue was intelligent?
Trees were one, are living beings. So this is
this is a petrified corpse of a tree.
So I was at my buddy Nathan's, who I do sound work with, and we're basically right now, I don't want to get too deep into it because we're going to keep it low key, but kind of going into a kind of a scary short psychological horror type of film that touches upon that, when we're kind of self-titling it the Dark.
Okay.
So that's going to be fun. And I mean, it's a simple name to it, but it's going to fit the whole vibe of it.
Yeah.
And so I just kind of got inspired by seeing that and just wanting to come up with a really good, scary short horror. Not be too cheesy about it, but just touch upon those primal fears that we have.
Mm-hmm.
And we're gonna make it about 15 minutes long, so it's not too long, beginning, middle, and end. Length. It's very simple, 5 minutes, 5 minutes, 5 minute structure to kind of introduce the character. It might not even end up being 15 minutes. It might cut down to maybe a little over 10, but that's kind of the vibe I want to go for. Just a scary.
I like it just because I think horror movies in the last 10 years, we hit that digital era. We had a golden age of horror where. It was it's funny because at first it was just creature horror in general.
Monsters.
Anything that was a monster that wasn't human was freaky. Mm-hmm. It was a lot to handle, and then it got into kind of the gore, and then they started making gore effects, which were great, and it was people were like, wow. But horror had this golden age, I think, where they had the technology to make it shock and gore, but they didn't have the technology to show you everything.
Yeah.
And so your imagination got to work, and it filled in the blanks.
100%.
The theater of the mind, it's like the D&D mindset of the theater of the mind is great, because if you build too much, your mind doesn't do any of the work. But that old golden age had that blend where you've seen some of the creature, but you've seen the destruction, and your mind filled in the most horrific thing that you could think of.
Or how that would take place.
And then we had the digital age, where we started getting into real CGI effects, and it was awesome.
Yeah, because we had the slasher flicks of the 80s and 90s, or even the late 70s.
That's
with Halloween.
I think the golden age was the 70s. And I think the golden age was the 70s.
They were a little bit corny by today's standards, but they're still great in the fact that they were young filmmakers with not a big budget coming in making their crazy concept, and they didn't have the technology to make all the effects look that good. Yeah. But when you go into the modern day films like a Texas Chainsaw Massacre, when they remade that, I really liked the remake.
Yeah.
But then there's levels where they can go and show too much and kind of pulls away from what was that, like you were saying, that or your mind kind of creates the rest of it instead of showing every single aspect, and
I think we're going back
over brutality of it, like Rob Zombie, for instance. That's why I don't like the Halloween remakes that he did. The first one is actually a pretty good remake, but the second one is complete trash. I watched it not too long ago during the Halloween weekend they had on AMC. They were doing a run of Halloween films, and I'm just like, man, he really didn't pull that off very good for a sequel. And if he was, here's my thing. The Halloween series, they went 1 and then 2 were John Carpenter's films. And then after that, somebody came in and decided to totally go somewhere else with Halloween 3 Season of the Witch.
Yeah.
Had to do with these masks that people wore and they got stuck in their face and then they'd blow up and kill people. And it was like some mass murder, crazy Halloween thing. And like something that these special masks came out and they were advertised on TV and all the kids were buying them. And
I don't even watch
some scary concept. And it had nothing to do with the main line story. And so, like, if I was to
fucking annoying
as a director,
why would they do that?
Yeah, it doesn't make any sense. It has nothing to do with Halloween. It shouldn't even be a part of it. It should just be some movie called Halloween Season of the Witch. That's what I consider.
It could just be called Season of the Witch in general.
Yeah, just take out the Halloween part.
But they buy the rights to the name, and then they change it. They go for the money because they know it's going to bring in X amount of people. It's going to make X amount of dollars. The fourth one, why not make it? It's not going to be a good movie, but it's going to bring in 75% of what the last one brought in. So we'll just make it anyways and just get the money.
All right, and then they finally went back on track once they got to the Curse of Michael Myers #4. But if they're going to redo it, like if I was Rob Zombie, I would have branched out a 3-part to make the legit remake and make it a trilogy. Right. So that'd be sick. He kind of like did the first one. And then people and all the fan base and all these people were like, come on, dude, you gotta do another one, And the studio was probably like, oh, the old fans want another one. And he's like, well, I really don't want to do another one, but whatever. If you're going to pay me this much, I'll do it. And that's probably what happened. And then he just pushed something out, and it didn't end up turning into
I love the Devil's Rejects. So. And I did. I liked the Devil's Rejects. House of a Thousand Corpses was good. At the time when it came out, it was awesome because it was just something different.
It was great. See, that level he put together was good.
It was an homage to horror. Good. Like, you knew he was a horror fan. And then I think sometimes the studios get involved and are like, we can show so much, we can do so much, that I don't think they've gotten to the point where they realize the audience is past it. Like the shock jock thing. Howard Stern came out and shock jocks were cool. Every station had a shock jock. Well, now it's dying out, and not everybody really gives a shit about a shock jock because it's not shocking anymore. We've already been shocked. Now we want people that are intelligent, and we want to get on a realistic track, And you go to horror movies, and it's like we were all in awe because it was like we're seeing things for the first time that we've never seen. This is great. But almost everybody's kind of in unison now where it's like, yeah, we know you can make anything. Give us some content.
Yeah, give us something deep, something that touches.
And then filmmakers like you come in, and they come back and they say, hey, I want to get back into touch with the more dark, freaky, natural horrors and show less and not be
closer, I think, maybe.
Oh, yeah.
Just in case.
Yeah, it's picking up a 360, so it should be decent, but yeah.
But yeah, getting back to that less CGI and effect driven. You've shown us it all. Now you're going to get back to content.
Yeah, and it's because we know we can do these shots. We can do whatever you can think of in the computer. So now let's, not focus on that so much as making everything else right, and then add in your effects, and it'll all fit together.
I think
that's kind of the problem, is they were just so focused on being flashy and big, and a lot of these films were doing that. So
yeah, if it's going to survive, they have to tone it back and go back to kind of the basics. And
that's true. That's fundamental. That's why Star Wars Force Awakens did so good. Is because they blended what was once the practical with the digital, and they wanted to make a throwback film. George Lucas sold the company to Disney, presented him with a script for the third trilogy, and they didn't like what he had to offer for that third trilogy as far as the story, but they took what he had. We're like, we're going to go our own direction with it. So they rewrote everything, and that's what is now being created, the new trilogy. And with The Force Awakens, they wanted to make a retro movie, like a throwback to the old Star Wars, the classic films. And so that's kind of what they're doing with it, kind of giving it that vibe. But with The Force Awakens, that's why it did so good, is because it blended kind of the old school with the new.
Yeah.
And made this awesome film.
And that's the key, is using it for highlights. You know what I mean? Using that cool effect for certain little things, but you still keep it as real as possible. And I think it's going to get more of where they slip in a little bit of extra CGI to help give it a little bit more oomph. Yeah.
Definitely. That's good in the right amounts. And if you can do it practical, do it practical. That's what I like to say. And if you can't, then go that computer generated route. There's certain things that make sense that need to be
like world
computer generated.
World building, for instance, can definitely be
what Lord of the Rings did with bigatures, they called them. They made these because they were so big, they were bigger than your average person. But they're still miniature in scale to what they would realistically be for these giant towers of Minas Tirith and
true.
Just amazing.
Flying through with the camera.
You look at world building in
mini
Blade
robotic
Runner.
Cameras doing these shots, and then they all composited together.
Did either of you watch the original Blade Runner with Harrison Ford?
I just recently actually watched that before I got a chance to. Well, I haven't seen the new one yet. I'm gonna wait here a little bit and comes out on DVD.
I haven't watched the new one. I want to watch the new one, but the old one always kind of made me smile because when it first opens up and you see the setting of the future
it's trippy,
and the city, and you're like, this is not from the new age. This is not CGI. It's like they did this with skill and art. And cameras, and it looks it's equal.
It's true. You to think that all these shots that are done in there, besides the composited ships flying around, is all practical stuff. It's not. That's amazing. Model.
So it makes me question where I say yes, you can do world building with CGI, but do you have to? Can it get back to having
now you have to
do
find a way to add such detail? This actually has to push model makers even further. Because old days you could make some model and get away with it. Without a lot of detail. But now we have such high quality cameras that if you don't add that level of detail, you're going to lose that believability.
But that's where you blend. That's where I think the CGI blending comes in, where you build the world with models,
you polish it.
And you can polish it and add highlights with the CGI, so that what you're picking up is 80% real and tangible item, but then there's the little bits that add to it. Because I think the coloring,
like lighting,
well, it's hard because at one point we're getting there. We're actually pretty much at that point where CGI can blend perfectly with those practicals. Whereas before, if you tried to do that, you'd lose. Yes, it stood out, and you'd lose that believability. Where you have
Star
shots
Wars,
of a backdrop
HD
of
Star Wars.
Yep.
So shit.
Oh, I mean, yeah.
They had 3 versions.
Look at that. They had to take Harrison Ford and crop in the shot of like the CG Jabba the Hutt because it was a person. See, when they originally filmed the scene with Jabba the Hutt, it's like some dude who looked like a caveman, like Fred Flintstone or Barney Rubble type furry suit on, looked like a goofball gangster kind of vibe or something. It's like, where's my money, hon? And all this crap, just some normal guy actor. And then later on, he's like, I want to be this gangster slug villain, like slimy, scummy boss type dude, but an alien. And that's where Jabba the Hutt came from. But to blend those two, there's a scene where he walks around and he like steps over something. Or no, it's Han Solo walks around the actor. But when they turned him into a slug, he would have had to walk over his tail. So they made the scene where Han Solo like doesn't give a shit about his slimy ass. He just walks over his fucking tail. And they took Harrison Ford's shot and they cut him out like cookie cutter status and then animated him like going over it. It's you can watch it on the fucking Blu-ray or like on God. You can probably even throw it up on YouTube. No way. It's so corny, dude. That's funny. See it nowadays, and they tried so hard, even with the DVD revisions that came out in like the mid 2000s. Yeah. They really tried to because they knew the quality was getting better. They're like, all right, we got to go back and fix this. And I think they had the look. So dumb. The first CGI had the look, but was too flat and looked like clay. Right. Whereas when they redid it, they tried too hard, and the colors weren't right, and the model looked like dumb. I was like, this is not what Jabba the Hutt looked like. He's not green. He's like a pale gray with a little tinge of green. Yeah. Right. You know, he's got a bunch of porous gunk and stuff, slobber and shit.
What do you think about the Blu-rays? Like when when the first 6 movies came out on Blu-ray, and you had episode 1 through 3, then you had, you know, the old from the 70s and the new with the CGI, and they were both on Blu-ray, and they're both on, you know, back when they came out, 1080p TV, which is still, I think, great. I don't need 4K. I'm a broke man.
Hey, they ain't expensive anymore.
Right? It is in my world.
Yes, well, I mean, most stuff still is in projected in 1080. I have TV, and it's all
But when you see it, so and you look at it, and you go, okay, they doctored up the 70s films, right? Looked really good. I mean, when I see, you know, I just watched Army of Darkness on Blu-ray, and it looks like it was just shot today. You know, it looks like it was just released, remastering.
They even go back and they, you know, part of remastering, they go back and recolor the film. Yeah. So it's like the coloring's perfect. Like they have color artists now. Like whereas in the old days you didn't have digital color artists. Now they have guys that are so good at it.
And that's what I mean about using the CGI to touch things up and highlight. Because when I see the 70s movies with the props and the handmade everything, the floating droid in the beginning of
Empire,
yeah. When they're in the snow and that droid floats up at first, the one that's looking for Han Solo, and he sees it, it's like, man, that thing's shooting, and it shoots the red laser, and it's like, dude, this looks so dope.
Right? It looks realistic.
Yeah, and then I try to watch episode 1 through 3 on Blu-ray, and it was so well defined, and it looked so good on my TV. The CGI looks like cartoon.
Yeah, you watch the I'm watching ship when they're flying the Gungan ship down there, and you got like Jar Jar next to Qui-Gon and them, and they're flying that Gungan ship down under the water, and there's elements where you're like, I can see through that, dude. That was on a green screen backdrop. Right. It wasn't motion tracked.
Yeah, right. Immortals movie on my TV when I play it, there's like a scene where they're like on top of this like pyramid thing, all the gods, and it just looks like cookie cutter, like they
cut out the cliff on a green screen, and they didn't properly composite it.
Yeah, well, I don't think they. I think for
that
the
can be
technology,
a problem too, is the artist doing it can really just not know what they're doing.
Frame, dude, because what we were watching on back then, it was 100% acceptable and unnoticeable. I don't think they anticipated it getting so high quality that it was like, you can see this, like, oh my gosh.
And after, the weird thing was all TVs were the 4:3 aspect ratio, whereas when you went to see it in the theater, it was to how it was shot. You could see it in its full 18:9 cinematic aspect ratio. And then when, you know, they had VHS come out, I don't know what, there was something before VHS, but VHS only projected things in 4:3, so you're losing part of your movie. People didn't even understand that at the time, and I was like trying to explain that to some people right a little before we were at that age where we jumped into
when we had to buy movies on widescreen.
I was like, you're missing part of the movie. They're like, oh, so what?
I hate widescreen.
What they shot, you're literally missing part of the art. They shot these scenes
this much off of each side,
right? And it doesn't seem like a lot, but then you add those two up, and you got this wide cinematic viewpoint. You got to see that because that shows. Yeah, a little guy off to the right. You never knew this droid that was over there or something. You know,
you're like, oh, that's who they were talking to.
Well, sometimes it felt like that because there was moments where they shot these scenes in a particular way that they lost some of the actor's face in some levels in close-up conversations.
Right.
You would lose some of that stuff. So now that we've moved to that level, and I think with I think of A New Hope, because Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi are really, you know, well-defined and good for what they had good enough effects that touch-up wasn't needed a whole lot, and what has been done looks good. But Episode 4 was so raw And George Lucas barely got it made. He went over budget.
Yeah.
He didn't even have full control over what he wanted, his vision, because these cinematographers were like, I shoot this way. And they just did what they wanted to, you know? Yeah. And he was like, well, fuck you guys. I want to make my movie here, you know? Yeah. This guy told me I can make my movie. The studio's paying for it. Why are you telling me I can't get this shot? Right. And he had all these issues. But he finally got the movie out, became the biggest blockbuster of, you know, still to this day, the biggest sci-fi blockbuster of all time. Huge. Oh,
still, it's one of the greats, dude.
And huge. One thing they had to go back and touch up a little bit was, you know, certain fragments and stuff in the film, and then scenes where you're watching the Death Star fly, or when they're doing the Death Star battle, and they're flying through space with the TIE fighters and these ships. It just didn't hold up on a high definition Blu-ray 1080, seeing all this crispness, and you're just like, that looks like dump, because they did these things called a garbage mat, where they just cut out, and they couldn't rotoscope, which is where you cut out like cookie cutter perfectly. Right. Yeah. And now they can do that digitally, and so they went back and fixed that stuff, and they actually went and took CGI and added in CGI shots of TIE fighters into the whole scene, so they blended a little bit of extra CGI scenes to make not only that whole dogfight scene on the Death Star longer, but feel more realistic with some moving camera shots and stuff that really felt and brought it together. So it's cool that they can do that.
On the note of like rotoscope, CGI, green screen, did you ever watch Film Riots? The Film Riot one where they do the helicopter landing in the backyard? And they buy like a $12 Apache helicopter model off of eBay.
You know, I'm thinking I might have, but...
And they literally put it on a little green screen platform like this, and they just film it for like a second or a minute, and then they take the blade and they copy paste it, and they splice it so it looks blurred, and then so it looks like you have this blurred rotation of a thing.
Like it's going.
And there was no motion, yeah. And they use all this, and so then he's standing in his backyard talking, doing his thing, and all of a sudden he starts yelling, and the wind starts blowing, and this chopper just lands in his backyard, dude. Yeah, man. And I'm like, man, this shit's better than some of these fucking movies that they're putting out that are in theaters. And it kind of pisses me off, because I'm like, what's going on with all these talented ass people on YouTube that can't get to make something, and then I see it in the movie, and I'm like, these guys doing this with a freaking eBay Apache chopper look just as good as Star Wars in the 70s. Off eBay. So why can't they be putting little models together and being like, hey, this is our thing, and we're going to do this, and it's going to look dope.
That's what I love about that. Really made me... That's why I love Peter Jackson as a filmmaker, and the whole thing he created with Weta Digital and the workshop over there in New Zealand, is they had artists that were so passionate that they went the extra level. Like, you're like, oh, we have the budget to do this. These dudes were like, no, I'm going to stay overtime, and I'm going to make sure that this model has this extra piece of detail. And they're just so good at what they did, and that's why I feel like Lord of the Rings is just amazing.
The first one and some of the second.
Yeah, I mean,
one and the third.
Yeah, I mean, just all together, it's pretty good. You know,
Viggo Mortensen said by the third movie there was so much CG, he was very disappointed.
There was
because Viggo Mortensen took it seriously. He learned how to ride.
I like Viggo Mortensen.
He learned how to ride a horse. Like I said, he did sword fighing. He took it to the next level as an actor, as Aragorn.
Every single movie he does as an actor,
right? He's a fantastic actor.
Dude, I believe his character in that movie. Seriously,
Aragorn.
Yeah, when I see him, I think of him. I don't think of him.
He's definitely a top fave dude.
He was able to pull off the romance role. He was able to pull off the hero role.
Yeah, it's very like subtle and touching.
Cinematic.
Russian mobster. Anybody?
Well, but I'm saying
Promises, though?
But I'm saying just in the Lord.
Just in the
Lord of the Rings. He was able, because he had that love affair. Well, not affair, but he was in love with
secondary love that he had.
For, and it was like the elf. Oh my god, why can't I think of her name?
Something. Not Arwen.
No. Oh yeah, it's Arwen.
Yeah, Arwen.
Yeah, it's Arwen. Wait, is it Arwen? Eowyn is
King Theoden's daughter. Yes, so Arwen, and then Galadriel's.
Galadriel's the basically elf. One of the first people ever made.
She was like the elf queen, right?
The Maiar.
No, that's all the wizards. There's only 5 wizards that were created.
Yeah, but she's part.
Dude, I got the Silmarillion sitting in my room too. I should reread it.
I got it here.
That's amazing, and that brings me to.
I can't though. I just started Wizard's First Rule, man.
Oh man, Amazon and Netflix are battling it out for who's going to.
Netflix is battling. I hope Netflix gets
the Lord of the Rings television series they're going to make. It's going to be the biggest budget television series ever created, $250 million.
Oh.
They're gonna be able to put something together that's like never before. They're taking the vibe of what you saw with Game of Thrones, and they're like, we're gonna do it Lord of the Rings style on a whole nother level, like, you know, probably even better than Peter Jackson can even envision.
Netflix gets it.
And
so wait, now are they doing original writings in the realm?
They're working with Tolkien.
Where they're going to tie it all in. The Silmarillion, they're going to do it all. Silmarillion is going to tie everything into one vast story from beginning to
as long as it's not a Tolkien rape. I'll be cool, but I'm gonna be apprehensive.
I think with the Tolkien estates,
they have a big. They're really touchy.
Yeah,
they're touchy.
They're
very.
Fox was in the workings with Marvel, with X-Men and Spider-Man.
But their licensing is on a whole.
You know, I'm just saying.
They,
I don't want to see a destruction like Marvel got fucking ruined. Not ruined, but. They got raped.
I think that like you were saying, the Tolkien estate is so particular, and they should be. They have a right.
They're getting their rights back
to be particular. Tolkien estate, they do have a right because that stuff that was created is it's so good. They don't want it to be raped, like you're saying, and so that's why they're particular who they're going to end up giving this deal to. And whoever gets it's going to probably put together one of the best.
If they 100% respect his creation, because he created a full realm, dude, and like the Silmarillion is like reading the fucking Bible.
That's wild.
Wild. It really is, yeah, dude. So like, you don't have to be creative and create your own depiction of it. Just follow with what he has in the confines that he created, and write something good. But don't go trying to change it like The Walking Dead, and then
seriously. I was watching a trailer for The Walking Dead, and I was like, "Wait, what show are we watching? What show is this? Like seriously, it blew my mind. I was like, "This is The Walking Dead," and all it was like 3 groups of people now fighting each other. And
I went through the first 2 compendiums, and that was enough to make me not watch the second season. I'm not even gonna lie. I've only watched the first season of The Walking Dead, and I refuse to watch anymore because I read the first 2 compendiums. Not even all of the friggin' Walking Dead graphic novel, but. The show doesn't touch on anything that the writer was trying to get at with that. And
right?
Dude, the graphic novel is so much more real, raw, and it touches more on the humanity side of what it's supposed to be, that really the zombies aren't the main factor, and it's that he touches on the realities of what humans are capable of.
That's what the seasons are about now.
Today. Yeah.
The seasons are actually the past 2 seasons I think are all about basically the most powerful clans, which is Rick and Glenn and all their group against Negan and his group. And so now it mostly is it's against humans,
but the alterations
which I guess
that they
makes
made
sense to an extent, evolving the story like that. But they might as well
boring if it was always zombies.
They might as well just call it.
And that's what it is. Like the prison, the prison's
way more The Walking Dead because they already have the virus. If they have a heart attack and die, they'll wake up and be a zombie. So they already have the virus in them. So anybody that's alive has the virus. It's just so essentially they're already the Walking Dead. That's
so. What happens if they reproduce? Where the children have the virus? I never thought of that concept till just now. But
potentially, I mean,
that's just a good idea because they're the only you have these clans of people that are left on the planet, and they're gonna have to reproduce to keep
Glenn.
Humanity
they kept
going,
how Glenn dies in the book or in the comic. They kept it exactly how it is,
almost
verbatim to what. The actual dialogue is what Glenn and Negan say. It's almost to the T. Someone made a YouTube video of the scenes and then the comic.
Wow.
And all of the dialogue from the comic is almost to the T.
That's pretty amazing, man. I've only read the first 2 graphic novels. Trevor had them. My buddy Trevor had the first. I think he has all of them now, but he let me borrow the first 2 and. Pretty sweet. Before the show got kicked off, really.
I wish they would stick to it, and I guess they say like the writers do it because they want to give the audiences something new for the people who read it. But it's like for everybody that I know who's ever read it, nobody wants to see a new depiction. They just want to see the awesome depiction that was on paper brought to life. Yeah. Nobody wants to be like, I want to see The Walking Dead rewritten in a different story and brought to life. It's like, no, I want to see the story that I love brought to life and kept as real as possible. I understand cutting out the first half of the first book of Lord of the Rings, Tom Bombadil's not in it.
That's where I'm excited that they'll be able to add those levels of detail that they could have never
have. The first movie and
Peter Jackson was overwhelmed
saved twice, 2 or 3 times by Tom Bombadil. They get saved, and
they have to make. He has an entire movie himself.
Like in a sense,
Tom Bombadil.
That's why Peter Jackson almost didn't do The Hobbit, because when he was going to do The Hobbit before The Lord of the Rings, but to him, The Hobbit was so complex, and to do that many characters and tie them all together and make it work.
It is.
At the time, he couldn't even fathom it. So he's like, I'm going to do Lord of the Rings.
And I do understand the edit of not having Tom Bombadil, but it's like, you know, because you look at it and it's like, I understand the editing out of something that big too, because you have to compress it for time.
Right.
But to rewrite and just go off on your own and be like, we're not going to have him go to the Prancing Pony. Instead, we're going to do this, and we're going to have him go like this, and we're going to get rid of this scene and just rewrite it like this because we think it sounds better and it makes more sense. It's like, no, don't do that.
Does take elements away.
You can't do that.
And work around it, but all the time gaps that there are in the movie. And
that's what I feel happened with Walking Dead, though.
Oh, you're right. So you don't really quite
because when Frodo and Sam get back in the third movie, you know, it's like I think it's like 14 years until Frodo and Bilbo leave with Gandalf onto that ship. So that last scene in the movie where it's like they're back in the Shire and they're at the pub and they all cheers.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden
that's a long period of time before that next.
It's them at Rivendell going onto the ship. That's like 15 years. That's like a huge,
so they've been just chilling, having a good time up until that point where they're going to the Dying Lands.
When Frodo holds the ring, when Gandalf leaves the ring with Frodo, that also is like a 4 or 5 year gap, I think.
Oh wow. So there's a lot of time that takes place that's not being accounted for in the movie.
And it could, I feel like it could have been described instead of doing such long travel sequences of like, here they are crossing the open plain.
Left for 5 years to this day.
Yeah, they don't quite get that fairy tale with it, with like describing that stuff as much.
Even though the travel scenes did really give you that broad feeling of like they're covering ground, they're traveling vast places.
Gandalf's riding a horse with who does he have on? Pippin on him, and he's going over the field, and then when they come over and you see Minas Tirith and the whole Pelennor fields.
You could nitpick it all day when you read it. You know, you read it and you nitpick the movie, but the truth is like it's always going to be better to read the book, and that's always going to be my feeling. I'll never have an expectation that you can take, you know, a book that's this thick and take all 3 of them and say, I'm going to make this into a 3-hour movie or 3 3-hour movies. I'm going to make this into a 9 or 10-hour movie. It's like, no, you're not. But valiant effort, and Lord of the Rings is awesome, and it's a fucking great movie, and I don't hate it. I'm not mad at Peter Jackson. He did an awesome job.
No, dude, I mean, for the time, what he had done, and to think that the whole Lord of the Rings trilogy extended is almost as long as all 6 Star Wars movies.
It was done as well as anybody could have done it. I'll put it that way. Peter Jackson, if anybody, you know, James Cameron, maybe. There are other directors. I won't take away from other awesome directors that have the ability to make motherfucking awesome movies. You gotta have a passion,
and that's the thing that Peter Jackson, he had the passion for those stories. He grew up with those stories that he read and these films he watched, and so he's really passionate on those stories that touched him in a certain way, and he wants other people to feel that, and that's what makes a true filmmaker, is somebody who wants to share that same thing they felt as a
I agree with you,
someone reading that art, or, you know, as a child, that vision you had of these things that you were experiencing. So
people can be haters and be like, oh, Peter Jackson, the big budget, James Cameron, big budgets, and Avatar, and and blah blah blah, and it's like, well, they make really good movies.
Yeah, you're not gonna please everybody. You know what I mean?
Terminator sucks.
Some very opinionated people who just want to be that way, or they want to have. It's like, dude, just look at it for the art it is and enjoy it. And I feel like people that look at things objectively kind of see that, you know, as like artists or people who have that creative mind state, they just look at things in that way and don't judge it so strongly. They can see where the person put their heart into it or created that art. So
yeah, it's definitely a lot of the movies are done as well as they could have been done. You know what I mean?
for the time and the amount of money.
Yeah,
but I feel like he kind of went away from it's like Lord of the Rings started out they still did a lot of practical effects, but like you said, by the time they get to Return of the King, it's very CGI oriented, and then moving into making The Hobbit, it was like even more so. They didn't do as much bigatures anymore. They said, oh, we can just make these buildings CGI, and it's like, nah, you can't take that away. You
saved a lot of money, but you took away from it.
Yeah, you know, it's like, why not do that? Like with The Matrix, the one thing that annoyed me about The Matrix,
thieving bastards.
The one thing that annoyed me the most about The Matrix is the fact that you watch the first movie and it's so like well practically put together. Everything was done
original writer,
a real creative realm of physical things and acting and actors within these real backdrops, and then you get to The Matrix Reloaded and Revolutions, and it's just an all CGI fuckfest. It's just everywhere. It's just all over the place. It's just you're flying through crazy worlds, and some of that you do have to show on that level. Yeah. But they could have definitely kept some practical stuff. And the one thing that I hate the most is they took away bullet time. They did not do the bullet time camera stuff. They're like, well, we can just move the camera in the computer, And it's like, come on, dude, that was artistic. Even the guy explaining it was like, well, we can do crisscross patterns, we can do the loop-de-loops, and fucking make the cameras go this way. And it's like, well, with the first movie, you just experimented. You just touched upon something that's epic.
Yeah, you could have
used that again. And they didn't even go anywhere else with
Taking it
and
further.
That's where I'm like, man, if they would have used those elements.
Well, like, did you notice the kind of like plot holes? The storyline was a little odd in Reloaded. How all of a sudden, like, the first half of the movie is really good, and the second half just kind of doesn't make sense.
Jumps,
the ending,
I think it probably jumps.
And then the third one is weird. Well, you had the original writer who wrote The Matrix, and then halfway through Reloaded was an argument about where the writing goes. And then the Wachowski brothers changed.
They're like, we're gonna figure it out. You know,
they stole his story. They changed 51% of his writing so that they could still have the rights and make the movie. And then he got fucked out of the end of it, and that's why the movie goes haywire halfway through. And you can see where they stole the rest of the movie from. That's why I fucking, you know, as far as I know, you know what I mean. Like that's shit I've read and heard, and you know. But that's where my opinion goes. If somebody gives me information that leads me to that's totally incorrect, then I'll be like, oh damn, well, you guys still fucked up the last two movies, but
right. I mean, they're still great. They're awesome. It's fun to watch them. There's scenes like I really love the scene when the two scenes are my favorite. It's the Burley Brawl in the second movie when they're battling in that little corridor after he talks to the Oracle.
Yep.
And then all the Smiths come out and he's beating him to shit with the pole. And that part's cool, you know, a little CGI, but it's fun. I was like, this is fucking amazing.
Yeah, it's
And then
cool.
you get to the third movie. I really like the final Smith battle with like they're showing these shots going, and they did use some practical effects for some of that stuff with the rain, and they actually I'll give them props. In the third one, they did do an epic thing. They made a replica like masks of Agent Smith of Hugo Weaving's face. And so Hugo Weaving, the actor, is looking around, and all these actors he's seeing like hundreds of him all around him, and guys, you know, they're going to lunch break, and they're all wearing the masks, and they all look like him, and he's like looking at himself. He's like, I didn't realize I had such a. He's like, oh, I'm going bald. Got to see himself from that perspective. But that scene is pretty sick when he's fighting. They're like fighting to you know, take over the Matrix. If he loses, the whole Matrix is fucked. If he wins, and he destroys everything and brings back that balance.
Thanks for tuning into this episode of the S.M.A.R.T podcast. If you guys enjoyed that, please give it a like, hit the subscribe button and the little bell notification, and you'll be updated when we go live next time. And until then, keep your brain entertained with the S.M.A.R.T podcast.